Hey kids, back. I want to talk about musical stuff. Haven't done a lot on musical things in a while, and I want to get into that today. I think that the minute you try to drill down and you have having a musical conversation by itself can be hard. And it's something I think people run away from. And then people try to address it and they either get themselves into all sorts of trouble. It's one of those subjects that no matter what you say, you're going to be attacked from 9 different angles. There's got to be a way to do it, right? Without you could still have an opinion, but there's got to be a way to do it by nipping a lot of that in the bud before we even go down whatever road we're going to go down. So I've been thinking about that. And I guess one of the things, the minute you want to get into a conversation that is more or less musicological, starting to talk about genres and talking about styles, people get very concerned or worried. I guess that they think, this is not unjustified, that you've got some kind of agenda and that you're trying to define things. And people actually, it's fair because people do define things so that whatever particular genre they're into ends up being, at the top of their own personal ziggurat. And I suppose that's why people get, okay, where are you going with all this? I think it's a lot easier if I think there is a truth here that trying to put some kind of criteria on the subject as a whole and thinking that all of it has to somehow agree with that criteria, that you're going to find some universal criteria, I think by itself is a mistake. Now, some folks will sit there and say, well, all music's music. It's all the same. I'm not saying, I'm just saying, there's this. That's not the way to go, okay? To sit there and go, I want empty statements and I'm not going to touch the subject. So, you think whatever you want to think. Well, people are going to think whatever they want to think anyhow. I think there's a way to approach this, that you could talk about it, but understand at the outset just how big, it's not some specific thing. It's an enormous subject, goes over centuries and all these different peoples and all these different cultures and all of these different ideas that animate these various styles of music and philosophies, and that they don't all agree, that they have come from different ideas, that they can't all exist in the same soup happily together because they do espouse very, very different philosophies, ideas, and looking at the universe. So they're not all going to agree. And once you say, okay, or even the purpose of it, it's very hard to have a conversation and sit there and go, you're going to put all of that, you're going to encapsulate all of it. I don't think that is even necessarily doable. So why not we do that at the outset? There's nothing wrong with, I think making believe, let's not talk about it. There's a lot of let's not talk about it. I think we always do better by talking about everything. Talking about style is good, all right? Because then at least you plumb into the depths of whatever subject here we're submerging ourselves into, and these differences aren't a problem. These differences actually help illuminate. Noticing the differences, enunciating the differences isn't a reason to get into a fight. All right? It's because hopefully we're not making some kind of value judgment. Now you're allowed, obviously, subjectively to like what you want to like and like it for whatever reason, and you can buy into those. Great, that's okay. But I think it's kind of a separate conversation. Everyone has got their subjective, this is how it hits me and this is how I feel. Fantastic. And people find their art and people find their inspiration in all sorts of different ways and all sorts of different methods. And again, all fine. Doesn't need to be a contest. But making believe that there are no differences, that there's nothing but differences. And knowing those differences helps us understand all this stuff. It's a help. It's not harmful. It's only harmful when, again, someone puts some kind of agenda behind it. They're trying to make that value judgment and sit there and go, there are things that are more complex. There are things that are more simple. Saying that the complex thing is complex isn't an insult to other forms that aren't as complex. It's just a different method by which you could admire the complexity. Sometimes the complexity by itself leads to really interesting forms of art and very complicated, amazing things. Sometimes it's a problem, and sometimes something that's more direct, works much, much better and can get across a very, very deep idea in a much more simple way. Oh, well, then, okay. So there's a million ways to skin this. And I think that's not a problem. I think it's an interesting thing. And I think going down those depths, again, this has nothing to do with your artistic side, but besides our artistic side, I'm talking to you as if you're a musician. I'm talking to you as if we are on the team in that sense. And again, even when we're on the team, because we're musicians, we have very, very different ideas about what we're doing, again, because of all these styles and genres and all this different stuff that we like. Okay, so we may have very different ideas about what it is we're supposed to be doing and why we're supposed to be doing it. And the whys are more interesting sometimes than the thing we're doing anyhow. So I think we should be able to come outside of our own personal bubble and see all of these other styles that we're not involved in, styles we are and the styles we aren't, and sort of learn from them and appreciate them. They're not our enemy, right? And recognize that we may all not be talking about the same thing for the same reasons. I think we get into trouble. We all say, yep, we're all on the same page, when we couldn't be further from that. So healthier, right, to sit there and go, there's all of this different stuff being done for very different reasons, with very different ideas about people's personal philosophy, about the nature of reality and what all this is, and thus what they're saying. There's as much different music almost as there is people, right? That's okay. But understanding the differences doesn't make you less forgiving, I would think. And my thinking has always been that it makes you more forgiving, more understanding. So let's not say, well, things would be great if we just had peace, everyone shut up. No. Assuming the discussion has some civility to it and that we know we're all coming from a place of, hopefully, honesty with some integrity, we can sit there and go, okay, this is different stuff. And it does it in different ways. We may disagree on that too. But again, I think half the battle, we can get there assuming that we're people of making essentially good faith arguments. We're not lying to each other. You may disagree with my viewpoint, it's fine. And I could disagree with yours. No. Okay, that's fine. We're not all going to agree and it's fine. But you can have a conversation when you know that the people you're talking with are essentially not lying either to you or to themselves. And that happens too. So, I'm reminded of, again, the siloing, this cultural siloing that we go into. I'm talking about in the musical sense. I remember, the old Blues Brothers movie where the Blues Brothers either book themselves or get booked. I'm not so sure. In an establishment where they clearly don't play the kind of music they do. They're Chicago and they're rhythm and blues and they're, whatever it is, a lot of rock and whatever. And they're in this place that does country and they're like, I don't know that this is the right room for us. And I guess it's John Belushi, right, who goes with his partner to the bar and says, what kind of music do you usually have here, ma'am? And the barmaid looks at him and she says, well, we have both kinds, country and Western. It's hilarious. It's a great line. But, both kinds, because there are only two. Nothing else counts. And before you sit there and go, boy, they were really making fun of those country folk. Actually, that applies just about anywhere. right? Whether find a genre. One of the things people do to sort of self-protect themselves is that they convince themselves that their style is the only music. And so anything that happens outside the bubble doesn't matter. None of that even counts. Only counts the scene they're in, right? I see this in what we colloquially refer to as classical music, for instance. And I love classical music. But the classical music world is not terribly interested in anything else going on. They're interested in their scene. And that's, again, to a degree, some of this is fair, right? But to think that there's nothing else out there. Yeah, look, all genres do this. Media silos us this way. You read a particular magazine, there's a point of view, right? They have a point of view, whether you're talking about an online thing or whatever, whoever it is publishing a particular, they have a point of view. So you're seeing it through their, and if you adopt that, then you are, but the minute you adopt any point of view, you're sort of cutting off some others. It's very hard to stay open to lots and lots and lots and lots of ideas. And there's a degree of loyalty expected, right? You're in a particular scene, you have to believe a particular thing. Look, it happens with jazz folks all the time, and I've been a jazz person in the past. And I see it again, and it's always bothered me that I would think, and I think we should kind of expect ourselves to be able to talk to folks in other genres and in other scenes, like they're in our scene, and recognize, oh, there's a whole bunch of differences here about what we think is important. Talk to singer-songwriter people. The only thing they think is even going on in the world is more singer-songwriter stuff. And the forms are going to push different things. In the singer-songwriter world, lyric writing and lyrics are very important. And to a degree, it's about poetry as much as it's about chords and all sorts of other things. Does that make it unmusical? It can make it sort of, look, it is different. Again, it is different. The minute you get into that vocal thing, there are some forms that are all about simply being popular. There are a lot of folks that you will bump into who are working in various musical fields. All that matters is who's making bread. Oh, well, Jesus. So it's not necessarily about, they wouldn't know what to do with an artistic instinct and look down upon it. There are other folks who are all about the art, and they're basically gotten so about the art, they forget there are human beings, so they're essentially making music for other people in the same scene as them. That gets insular and strange. So all of this stuff is sort of going on. And in this, we all have to find our personal way. So part of what I want to plant that flag, boom, right at the beginning about just how difficult the subject is. And hopefully to have it, I think to even have it, we have to make an agreement amongst ourselves. If you're going to watch this, right, you sit there and say, okay, I'm willing to hear him out, but I don't expect to agree with him on everything. And I don't think you will, and I don't think you should. Okay, I'm not asking for agreement. I think if anything I say spurs some ideas so that it's easier to have more conversations about it, that's great. And that's I think it's the openness. At least recognizing, look, there's all this stuff. And the criteria, look, I have a friend of mine, I'll give you an example. I'm a trumpet player, okay? And a friend of mine, I won't say a friend because he's not a close friend, but he's an acquaintance and a guy I've known, is a former, he was in the Metropolitan Opera for, I think, close to 30 years as a trumpet player. But he was never really a classical player before that. He was really a commercial player. And he was studying with some classical people, and he got this opportunity, and he got the job. I think to a degree, it surprised him that he got the job, but he got the job in the Metropolitan Opera. And that when he got there, his impression was, wow, I've got a lot to learn. And if I want to be part of the scene, I want to respect this scene. I want to understand it. and he did. He managed to make a career of it, and at this point, I think is an excellent classical musician. Now retired, great player. But one of the things he loves commercial playing just like he always loved commercial playing, and he loves jazz, and he loves all sorts of things. Okay, and I think he understands what the hell it's doing. So he has a much broader look at playing my instrument than I think most people do. Most people go, they're legit, and they go, the old expression, right? Legit. But they go and they play classical music, and the tone, the techniques, everything about doing that is not the same as you would be in other genres. If you're a commercial trumpet player, you're going for a whole other thing, a whole other sound, with a whole other technique. And one of the things he mentioned, and I thought it was great, and it's great when people do mention it, is I think he shared somewhere of social media recording of Lee Morgan playing a ballad, great jazz trumpet player. And he said, if any of his classical friends were to listen to this, they would recognize that again and again and again and again, this guy was doing things that were, quote, technically illegal in their world. And yet, and this is, I think, where he should get enormous credit, and yet in the genre that it's in, it's spectacular work, and it's in fact fantastic art. Good for my friend, my acquaintance, but good for him, right? There's more to it. What would be wrong, which would be unacceptable in one genre, is absolutely fantastic in another, right? So there isn't this complete agreement as to what any of this is. What we agree on usually is we can, I think in general, agree that something's been effective and it hit people hard and worked in an artistic sense. If you're into particular genres, you can sit there and go, okay, within this world, this person is absolutely spectacular, and here's why, and it's incredible. But you've got to understand it within its terms. And I don't think there's anything wrong with requiring that of ourselves, certainly. And to some degree, you hope that folks who are not musicians are able to sit and go, oh yes, within this world yes, that's good. That's part of their education as well. We're all trying to, I think, learn more. So, we can, the idea that there is some kind of perfect playing going on, playing by what criteria, within what genre, etc. Let's keep going down this path. I had another one I saw recently. I saw Branford Marsalis, who is an incredibly bright individual, right? And he said something that, again, if you take it too far, you could get into probably some controversy. But what he said a very interesting thing. He was talking about, in his case, he was talking about playing jazz. And he was talking about a lot of the people that he grew up with were ear players. They weren't able to read music. He says, so to be able to play all that music, they had to pay so much attention to every little nuance and memorize every little bit of it. The difference between an oral tradition and a written tradition. And he contrasted those kind of players who he thought brought a great legitimacy to the music, because it was as if they were living it. They were in the culture that was producing this music. And then you go to college, where people are reading it, all right? And he said there's a disconnect when you leave the thing and now you try to teach the thing. And in essence, the minute you write it down, you're doing an impression, right? There's a disconnect. You're trying to take this thing, put it in another so people can read it and then recreate it. On some level, that recreation is never going to be the thing that we started with. It can get you into all sorts of trouble having this conversation. But I tend to think there's some truth to that. I'm going to take both sides of this argument, and I think there's a reasonable middle. I think Branford's got a point. If you hear a bunch of people, And unfortunately, see, this can run into all sorts of racial stuff and all sorts of, right? That's why it gets so tricky. It's why people don't want to touch it. I get it. But, you know, most jazz out of New Orleans and Chicago and New York, and so a lot of it was an African American form of expression. And then when people who aren't African American are trying to play it, I think there was a sense by a lot of folks who were the originators of this music sitting there going, no, it's not really it. It's close to it, but it's, I don't think they were wrong. I think there is a disconnect. Now, these turn into cultural appropriation arguments where, hey, are you just stealing somebody else's stuff? Yet there's a line that is crossed where, okay, are you just stealing somebody else's stuff? Not an okay thing. Now, I agree with that, but again, all of this is a matter of degree and percentages to some degree. How much have we gone over a tipping point and we've turned into another thing? Okay, or have we gone, and the other side of that is the counter argument sitting there going, well, there's cultural appropriation going on. Counter argument to that is, and it's a good argument, is things have influenced other things forever. It's not criminal, not a problem. Virtually every form, people borrow from everything all the time. It's okay. That's true. Both can't be true, Dave. No, maybe. And here's how I think. It's the reason why you do it. Is it possible? Let's take it out of jazz for a minute. You learn the bagpipes and you play the bagpipes and you get really good at it. I think it's probably doubtful that you will be on the same level as the Scottish Highlander who plays bagpipes, right? Because they've lived in the culture and they lived in that world. But at the same time, there have been numerous examples of people outside of a total scene who've gone into a total another scene that they were not either born into or raised into, and they're fantastic at it, and they're as good as anybody ever got, and they get the gigs, and they should get the gigs, and they're fantastic, and they're a great exponent. So there is this, so that does happen. Okay. And I think and again, being influenced by all these styles, oh great. You can be influenced all day and pick and choose all these things and put it into your stuff. The problem is if you put it in all your stuff and you claim that it is the original thing. No, it's not. You're making it into something else. So I think that creator needs to say, oh, sure, I've been influenced by this, I've been influenced by that. But I'm not trying to do that. I don't claim to be that. I'm doing my thing. Legal. I think legal. I think the trouble happens when, well, the other one that happens is there is this disconnect. People are trying very hard to be part of a thing that maybe they were never grew up in, claiming that it's more, that they are part of that. I think it's tricky. I'm saying it's impossible. Right? You sit and go, you're saying white guys can't play jazz. No, because there is so much cross-pollination and all of that that's gone on from all sorts of styles, and it's all a big soup, and it's fine. All sorts of people can play all sorts of stuff, and tons of people do, and it's cool. So I'm not saying that, but I think Branford's original point that there is, I think we could apply that to so much stuff. I can't imagine that a classical music performance today, like of Beethoven or of Mozart, can it really be what they heard, in the 1790s or 1810? Or can it really be? It's the best we can do. There's no recordings of that. Maybe we'd be disappointed. I don't know. Right? We are to some degree, time has gone by. Things do sort of degree, and the past is interpreted and we don't have a picture perfect image, as it were, of past art. If we could go back in time and to go to the Globe Theater and see Shakespeare, what would it be like we imagine? Or like what's performed today? Probably not, one would think, right? So there's inevitably going to be this change. And, going back to genre that way, even talking about a particular style, I'll go back to classical music again for this thought. We say classical music, we're talking about Western, mainly European-centric, through composed music. I know people sit there and go, well, what about all the other music in the world? That's classical music too. And what are you, some kind of... No. I'm just trying to talk about that particular style. I know there are tons of other things. You're great. They're all fine. It's great. But I'm a lot of that music is studied as a whole congealed thing. So I'm trying to speak within that context. I think you can have that conversation without being a criminal. I think you can do it. So let's, the late Baroque, Vivaldi, Bach, let's take those guys. Fine. And if you follow that road long enough through all the various movements that go on through Western Europe and all the different composition that happens, you eventually ended up a place where there's Schoenberg and Webern and Berg and stuff like that. Would you call Webern, if you play Webern and the Brandenburg Concertos by Bach back to back, would you say clearly it's the same music? No, you would not, right? Enormous differences, right? So even within one quote-unquote style genre, different stuff done for different reasons at different times. The only thing they really share is that there is this shared road that went from one to the other. They're not the same thing, any more than, particular animals and phylum and so forth are the same as, various creatures living today. The primordial ooze, yes, is probably genetically connected somehow to, the creatures of today, but they're certainly not the same thing. So there's even within a style, right? So there's sub style. I don't think knowing though that all of that is a problem. And I think knowing that, going back to the previous point, that it's okay to sit there and go, yes, something was created in a particular culture at a particular time. No, not everybody has to be that. You can go and be something else. Or you could take from that and go and be something else. But if you take from that and say, no, I am that, without really recognizing that there's been a break here, you're essentially doing something different because you didn't necessarily grow up in that culture or part of that thing. There is a degree of separation that takes place. Is it obvious, and can you say it spot on every time? No, every situation is different. And yes, people can, jump all sorts of styles and, do sorts of things. And, you don't have to be from a particular part of the world to play a particular kind of music. No, you don't. So there are numerous examples of people being able to jump around. But I think Branford's point wasn't necessarily wrong. The minute you get outside of that original culture, all right, well, then you've broken out of that original culture. If it's about the original culture, if that's what's important to you, then that break is important because you're interested in that. If you're just interested, you're fine with, I don't care about the original. I want to see where it goes. Oh, well, then we're having a whole other conversation. Again, these can turn into, but the reason I think we get into trouble with these is what's the intent behind, right? Is people are agree paranoid, right? Understandably so, particularly in this culture. They're a little paranoid, and they're convinced that you have an agenda, and you're out to get this, or you're over to elevate that, or I don't think it has to be that way. So I think the conversation about genre and the musicological conversation is a good one. It only helps us. Let me hit a couple other things that I think are interesting. Now let me get a little more personal, because a couple things happened recently where I think people get attached to a particular genre and then that becomes their musical identity. They identify with a style and say, I am the style. I always worry about that. I always have. Um, One of my favorite, I'm gonna tell you one of my favorite people. Um, when I was going to college, one of my roommates was a guy named Sam Newsom. Sam Newsom is a soprano saxophone player. And Sam was a much more advanced player than I was. And I had a lot of admiration for Sam because he was a very serious young guy and very bright. And Sam was a tenor man at that time. And, you know, about as serious as you could get as being a young, being a young jazz musician in the 80s, going into the 90s, this was guys wearing suits and, they were going to play Giant Steps Through the Keys and things, you know what I mean? But they were all about the repertory of jazz and making sure that they passed a certain standard. They wanted to be accepted by that world. There are so many musicians out there who need the acceptance of either actual academe or of a particular scene to be considered legitimate. And they go for that, and they go for that. And Sam had the gig with Terence Blanchard for a bit, and he's a serious tenor man, and he was coming up and doing that. And and I can't speak for Sam, but what I know that he did is that he saw that as kind of a dead end, I think, because he changed direction. Decided that I don't want to be part of someone else's thing, that I must conform to this thing. I thought the point was to be creative and to create our own thing. That learning the past, right, is great, right? But you learn the past so that you could absorb that, so that you could take another step that leads you to your own style and so forth. That was a thing that was preached to us. And then, no, they didn't actually do it. They just preached it, and then, okay. And so he started getting into world music and writing all sorts of things for some percussion ensembles, and went into, and sometimes a little more avant-garde stuff. And I was fascinated. Because I didn't think he wasn't being a sellout. It wasn't about this, I'll make more money, let's go more avant-garde because that always pays. It was obvious that he really meant this. And I think it took tremendous bravery, because he had a kind of a path he could have stayed on that would have been, but he went for himself instead of going for, I think, a sort of approval or whatever that I think is kind of an illusion. He went for his own thing. Now, as that has gone on, he got into more and more avant-garde stuff. He put down the tenor sax entirely, only plays soprano sax, and now does solo performances, not always, but a lot of solo performances, all avant-garde stuff, sometimes with instruments to the degree that he has created or he has made changes to his instruments, and incredibly creative. But you know what? I think that's a lot better than saying, let's play Autumn Leaves, guys. How many more times do we have to keep doing a thing from another time to prove to people? I think that, and he broke the code on that. I thought that was really, really cool. And even though, I don't know that I'd go check out all Sam's stuff that he's doing or whatever, and it's not the point. The point is I really respect the direction, the choice. And so these things have been going through my head recently. I had a couple things that going on. One was, another guy I know who's a trumpet player, like me, was literally live streaming his warming up one day. This is a guy I know only vaguely, but we know each other a little bit. He's had some great gigs. He does jazz gigs, but he's done big stadium gigs with pop acts and stuff like that. He does all sorts of stuff. Great. He seems like a really nice guy. But he's live streaming his warm up. And I think, if you play the trumpet, one of the things that is It's a tough instrument. I think most of us wouldn't want to live stream our warming up, because most of the time when we're warming up and getting our face all worked up and ready so we could play the horn that day, most of that doesn't sound that good. And I'm a big believer that it's not supposed to sound that good. You're warming up. You're not performing. You're working on things you're not good at, right? And you're getting your face going, and you're getting it all. It's a particularly ugly instrument that way. So I'm watching this guy warm up, and you know what? He doesn't sound very good. In fact, he sounds about as lousy as I do warming up, right? And I'm sitting there going, but he's a big deal, and he's a big guy. And yeah, most of us when we're warming up don't sound so great. And I think he deserved enormous credit for putting it out there, because it's the truth. Most of us don't sound perfect when we're warming up, right? I mean, it's made me feel pretty good. I sit there going, wow, some of the things I do, I'm tougher on myself than he is. Wow, that's not so bad. It's neat when you bump into some other musicians, because you realize, there really isn't that much of a difference between people who are considered on this incredibly high standard and people who are considered maybe not on that standard. The differences are minor, infinitesimal in some cases. There's a lot of people out there, and they all play good. We all play differently, but we all play okay. That was an interesting thing to see, and my experience thinking about my friend Sam reminded me of tons of people I've known who I think it was extremely important to them. I think Sam made this change. Sam continued to grow. Sam, right? And I respect that. What about all the guys who didn't? And I know a lot of those guys who haven't changed in any stylistic, meaningful sense since 1992, and have had made careers and take themselves very seriously, because they've got a college position perhaps somewhere. And I give the side eye. We'll have to do an entire video just on music education, because to some degree, music education, to me, is always a step behind, right? Something happens in the world, then the world of academia has to disdain to give it approval, and then we will recreate it over here the proper way. It's always the proper way was when it was done to begin with. So to need, a lot of folks desperately need this approval. That academia has said, you are this thing, therefore you are. The laying on of hands, absolution, whatever it is, they need that desperately. And again, I know some guys who have careers doing this, and they're successful doing it. But I think I wouldn't want to be that. I could sincerely say that I would not want to be that. And because I think it's turned into an empty gesture. If you're playing something and you sound just like 1938 or 1954, and it's 2024 going into 2025, okay, I guess you proved something. What are you saying to anybody else? I don't think we're supposed to be making an imitation of somebody else's stuff and go, look how great the imitation is. And there's tons of music that does that. I have friends in all sorts of areas where they don't write anything. All they do is they go and they play something else arranged for them, and boy, they're all over each other's ass to make sure they hit every note right. Because that's the epitome of being a great musician. Or the idea of being a sideman. They've been a sideman their whole lives. There's nothing wrong with being a sideman. Nothing wrong with being a studio player. Oh my God, I have great respect. I really did. But that's certainly not the whole thing. I suppose you could choose that. Okay. And I know for myself, and this is where this is the personal side of it, and that's sort of confessing here, is I don't want to do that. I don't need to be approved of by the academy. And the more you go to play a particular style and you join it, I don't want to do that. I would much rather be like my friend Sam. I think I'm supposed to do something that sounds like now. Okay? Last thing, I'm going to let you guys go. What does now sound like? Right? What does that mean? Two experiences recently that turned me on to that. I'll give you one from yesterday. Yesterday, I went to New York City with my son. My son I love my dude. My dude and I were going to Manhattan. I live north of New York City by an hour and 15 minutes, something like that. We were going to New York City, Christmas time shopping. Okay, great. And we brought along one of his besties from growing up. Great kid who we think the world of. So we all go down and we do shopping. We have a great time. And in the course of that, this kid is talking to me about the music he's checking out. Like, yeah, what are you checking out? Well, this kid has discovered Pink Floyd. And it's fine. I think Floyd's great, right? So, but the takeaway for me was he's digging Pink Floyd because there are no bands, right? There are no bands. Certainly there are people talented enough. He has to go back 40, 50 years to find the bad stuff he wants to listen to that still affects him. Okay, great that it does. I don't think there's any guarantor that past styles will still be effective for current people, nor necessarily should it be. But in this case, it is. Okay. But there's nothing like Floyd now. Because there's no bands now. It goes back to, harkens, I suppose, to the idea that there's no music in the culture now. Right? There's no record store. There's no tangible thing. You don't get a thing. You don't come home with a thing. The music's been devalued, right? It's a conversation we've had here, and many people have made it. It's right. You don't have a thing. There's no value to it, right? So, if there's no value, or if it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. Then there's nothing cool about having it. So no one pays attention to it, right? Now, I'm of the belief that music really is kind of eternal, that it will survive these things. But nobody listens, right? This kid is. Good for him. But in the main, listening is kind of a lost art. Does anyone have huge hi-fi systems in their house where they, everything else is off and the music comes on and they just living inside the music, they listen? People don't do that by and large these days. Okay. There are no record stores. You don't go to a place where you come together, right? It's the fall of the cinema. People don't come together to watch the film. People experience music, but it's in the background while they drive their car, while they do something else. It lowered significantly in the culture, and other things are social media, various other things have taken over the attention. And there is no attention. There's no sip, 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 sip. Probably not sustainable. And that's where I started to have some thoughts. My son and I like a certain kind of subgenre to electronic music. It's not dance music because it's not rave, it's not that. But it's also borders with a little bit of ambient music, which I love. So ambient stuff, there's also a lot of people doing a lot of piano music, solo piano music. I've heard Hani Irani, there are people out there doing some interesting things. They call it classical crossover. I'm like, okay, we're reinventing the wheel for a new generation because they don't want to go, they would like to listen to something from their time. I don't blame them, they should. So one of these groups that I like to listen to, that my son and I dig, was playing in Brooklyn. Duo, electronic stuff. Again, it's sort of an ambient feel. So I went to a club. Had to be, the most ancient human in the club. I didn't care. I went to the club, got a drink, and I knew what they were going to do, but my interest was, who's listening to this? They have an audience. There's no vocals. ambient, a little there's a groove. It fades in, it fades out. It's a tapestry. It goes away. It's gorgeous stuff. I like it. Who's their audience? They're able to sell out a place? Okay. All right. And they're not enormously popular, but they're not getting played it's not like they're getting tons of radio play. They're not, but yet there's an audience for this. What's that like? Do they all go and they just dance and they don't hear it and they're getting, because they're all going to get laid later and it's just about bumping into each other? Okay, I mean, it's fine if it was. I'm knocking their hobbies. Go, God bless. Go, please. Go forth. Get laid. It's great. Nothing wrong with that. Spent a good part of my 20s and 30s doing the same thing. Absolutely good time. Okay, but what is it? And I won't know unless I go. So I wanted it was a professional reconnaissance, as it were. I wanted to go. So I went. And eventually there's an opening act, okay, and then they come out and they start to do their thing. And this crowd is between 28 and 34, I guess. They're young people, but they're not super young, but they're not late 30s going to 40. They're not they're young people and they look bright. So it looks like a bright crowd of young people. It's a dance space. There's no area to sit. Everyone's standing up, right? And the lights so it's a space made for people going, right? It's made for that, right? Okay. And that doesn't happen. They all stand there and go. It's about that. That's how much movement is going on. There's that. And they sit there for about an hour and a half, stand there. Don't even sit, they stand there for an hour and a half. And they listen. This is not the crowd that goes to concert halls, I don't think. This is not a crowd that's used to going to, whatever the jazz place is and sits there and is quiet and listens to the jazz. No. They're a different scene. They're a scene of this time, listening to music that reflects their world, or so they think. Probably accurately. I'm not knocking them. But they're there to listen. It exists. It isn't dead. In fact, I think it's giving them something they don't get enough of. They're willing to stand for an hour and a half to get some cool sounds, to make them think, to get a little distracted. And sure, lose a social element. They're with their people and their friends. It's nice. But they're listening in the same way that people have always listened. So there's a fundamental, we've gone full. It's maybe just the beginning of any kind of germ of what might be any kind of listening musical renaissance. I'm not predicting any of that's happening. I'm not saying that's what is happening. What I'm saying is, in a world where there's nothing that will encourage you to listen, that will encourage you to spend time, that will encourage you to stop, that encourage you to not be distracted, but take time to chill, think, and have some long-form experience, which people in the main do not do as they once did, to a much lesser degree. Some of that on some level, on a completely organic, not created for them per se, it's happening by its own weight. That's cool. That's really cool. And it encourages me. Back to our genre conversation. I don't want to be the guys I knew in college who are now, playing at an institution or teaching at an institution and trying to get people to play in a style from 50 years ago or more, or 60 or 70 years ago. I did a lot of jazz gigs. I always thought that was what I was going to do. I don't think it is. I think it's time for something new. I think integrity requires that I do as my friend Sam did. To a degree, I felt like I've already started to go in that way for years. But I think it's going to happen more and more. I don't have to be that. I don't have to fit into somebody else's style. You should come up with your own style. You should write your own stuff. I don't need to be a side man. I don't want to be associated with another style. Do your thing. I think I can look at myself in the mirror and feel much, much better about that. And I think I can come to this conclusion not because I don't think about genre and style and all of that, but because I have. That's why I think I can do all this and understand this, and understand where my place in all of it is. So that's what I'm going to leave you guys with. If you've gone this long, Ray and I really appreciate it. Feel free. Look, I think the topic is hard. I really do. I really do. I think it's a tough thing, and we've all got to figure it out in our own way. But I don't think because one has a view that might sound a little more conservative or a little more liberal, or that either way that you're some kind of criminal. I don't buy it. I think there's a lot of different perspective here, and a lot to be gleaned and a lot to be learned. So you may sit there and go, gee, Dave, your take is way up. That's fine. You have hey, maybe you're right. And certainly maybe you're right for you. It's okay. But I'm coming to these views, I think, honestly. I don't think I'm lying to myself. And I guess, if anything else, that's the thing I guess I encourage in any of you out there making your own decisions about what what is it that I want to do, and what is it that, if you're interested, I want to make an honest expression. There are a lot of people sitting there, no, I'm just going to make this formulaic stuff because I got to make the money. Okay, well, you're having a different conversation. Again, there's all this stuff, and I'll admit, I am segmented and say, I'm a guy playing an anachronistic instrument. I like, I'm part of I like tonal music. I like fairly minimal music. Okay, smaller groups, tinier segment. I'm not saying my world is the only world that's right and all the other worlds are wrong. No, good God. But I also sort of have an idea where I fit, and I'm happy to fit in that. But it's a world that I want to create of my own and take my own take on it, that I don't feel I have to be beholden to style or I think the best work often happens when it's not. And isn't that what we're aiming for? I think it is. Oh, you think you're on that level, that you can do that kind of thing? Okay, fine. I want to do some original work. I don't want to do unbelievably derivative stuff. I'm gonna give it my best shot. I'm gonna be releasing music very soon. Like, I'm gonna start band camping like a track every month or every other month is basically the idea, and just keep getting stuff out there, and we'll see how that goes. And probably go nowhere because most everything goes nowhere. But you have to be able to look in the mirror at the end of the day and be like, okay, I'm good with this. I'm okay with it. So that's what I'm gonna do. Thanks, guys. Thanks for hanging out. I've got some other thoughts. I'm gonna talk to you guys at some point. We're gonna do a nice video about aliens attacking New Jersey, mass paranoia. People a little out of their gourd, and that's gonna be interesting, about just what a mess we are in and how it's gonna get messier. I probably not go too much into that. I'll let that take care of itself. Let that sort itself out. In the meantime, I need to work on some tunes. You guys be good. You guys be great. You guys be wonderful, and have a great holiday, and whatever holiday you celebrate and however you celebrate it. I hope it's good. It's a good break or whatever it is, and I will catch y'all.